Okay, this starts our chapter on photosynthesis and cell respiration. At this point, you should have labeled and colored your photos, your handouts from the back counter. So here we have the composition of a chloroplast. And then your note packet with the stages of photosynthesis. You've got stage 1, 2, and 3. So these are all posted on Google Classroom. You should have these filled out and ready to go by the time we start notes. To go through the vocab words, your vocab quiz will be coming up soon. Word number 1 is autotroph. And an autotroph is an organism that uses energy, such as light, to create their own food. So I think automatic, and these guys automatically make their own food. So these would be like plants and certain bacteria. A heterotroph is an organism that is not able to make its own food. So that's like you and me. We are heterotrophs. Although, yes, we can make ourselves a sandwich, we are getting that energy from somewhere else. We're not able to make our own energy. So hetero means different, so heterotrophs need to get their energy from different sources. Photosynthesis, photo means light, synthesis means to make, so photosynthesis is the making of energy from light. Wavelength is the distance between crests of a wave. So that's kind of hard to show here without an animation, but you've talked about wavelengths before in past physical science classes, especially if you've talked about visible colors. Chlorophyll is the pigment that is within a chloroplast. This chlorophyll, we're going to be talking a lot about this chapter. And chlorophyll is the pigment that's going to be able to absorb sunlight to give plants the energy that they need. Accessory pigments are pigments other than chlorophyll, and our main chlorophyll is chlorophyll A. So there are different types of chlorophyll. Chlorophyll A is our main one. So anything else besides chlorophyll A that absorbs sunlight is an accessory pigment. So that'd be chlorophyll B, C, and D, carotene, which you've heard of before, xanthophyll, anything like that. And think accessory, when you have an accessory to your outfit, it might be a necklace or shoes or a purse or a watch, or a hat, some type of accessory. It's not your main outfit, but it goes with your outfit. Same concept here. Light reactions. These are reactions that we're going to talk about this chapter that need light in order to happen. Dark reactions are the opposite. They do not need light to happen. They don't necessarily need dark, they just don't need light. So think dark, think don't need light. Number 9, a hydrogen acceptor. These are a molecule or a substance that is going to accept or take on a hydrogen atom during a process. Number 10 is a carbon dioxide acceptor. This would be a substance or molecule that's going to combine or accept carbon dioxide, and it's going to stable it. So we're going to see that in our stages of photosynthesis. Aerobic and anaerobic respiration. These are processes by which food molecules are broken down and energy is released. This energy is used to form ATP, which is going to provide energy to the cell. So we're going to talk about aerobic and anaerobic respiration. A hydrogen electron transport chain, number 12. This is a passageway that's going to move hydrogen electrons or both from one place to another, usually from an area of high energy to an area of low energy. NAD or NAD, this stands for nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide. So we just say NAD or even NAD. This is a coenzyme formed from the vitamin niacin. We're going to use this later on in the chapter, so just try to remember NAD. 2, RUDP or RDP, this is ribulose diphosphate. This is a 5-carbon sugar that we're going to use in stage 3 of photosynthesis. PGA stands for phosphoglyceraldehyde. I can't even talk today. phosphoglyceric acid, and it's a 3-carbon sugar. And then PGAL is phosphoglyceraldehyde. As you can see, there's a reason why we use the abbreviations and we don't say the word full out. They're kind of difficult to say sometimes. All right, so that concludes the vocab, and now we're going to be getting into the actual chapter notes. So first we want to know how energy flows. So we know that plants get their energy from the sun, and the ultimate source of energy for everything is the sun. So photosynthesis is the process by which plants are going to convert light energy into the chemical bonds of glucose. And glucose is what we use for energy, and it's also what the plants are going to use to break down to get their energy as well. So glucose is a major source of energy here. So we see our little picture here shows us the energy is coming from the sun. Here's our plant taking in that sun. The plants are also going to take in carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and going to take in water from the ground, or you watering it. And in turn, it's going to create energy in the form of glucose, C6H12O6. And it's also going to give off oxygen. We know that plants provide us with oxygen, and that oxygen you breathe in. So make sure you thank a plant today. Then the other part of this chapter, we're going to talk about how we are going to take in, as you know, organisms, we eat glucose and we breathe in oxygen. And as we do that, we are able to get the energy we need to build up our muscles, maintain homeostasis, all that good stuff. And then we let out carbon dioxide when we breathe, and we also let out water. Our bodies make water. You release water from your body in many ways, one of them being urination. So photosynthesis and cell respiration. And cell respiration is, once again, the process by which energy is released from glucose in the presence of oxygen. So we're, once again, taking in that glucose, breathing in that oxygen, creating energy that we need to do our daily functions, and we release carbon dioxide and water. You've probably noticed by now, by looking at this, but these two processes are the exact opposite of each other. So this is really a cycle. Photosynthesis, cell respiration. Then we can go through photosynthesis again, or plants can, and then, cell respiration can happen. So these processes really do go together, hence why we teach them in the same chapter. All right. So this is showing you here we have photosynthesis. And before we get into these processes, we really need to talk about ATP, because we're going to be mentioning ATP quite often as we go throughout these processes. And ATP is the king of energy molecules, all right? It is one high energy molecule that is formed during both photosynthesis and respiration. It stands for adenosine triphosphate, or ATP. Adenosine triphosphate, ATP. So here's the structural formula you see here to the left. So we call it adenosine triphosphate because it has an adenine, which is a nitrogenous base. It has a ribose, which is a 5-carbon sugar. And it has triphosphate, 3 phosphate molecules. When adenine and ribose are combined, it gets adenosine. And then obviously you understand, hopefully, the triphosphate. We have 3 phosphates here, 3 P's. P, P, P. So the energy of this molecule is located within these 2 bonds that we're pointing to right here. So this is a bond and this is a bond, all right? When we see our little tilde here, as I've learned it's called, this symbol for us is going to mean high energy. So we've got 2 high energy bonds here between the 3rd and 2nd phosphate and between the 2nd and 1st phosphate. So if we're going to write ATP out, we'd have adenosine. Then we have a normal bond between the adenosine and this phosphate. That's because this bond doesn't hold any energy, really. Then you have this phosphate here connected to another phosphate, and that's a high energy bond, so it's represented by the squiggly tilde. And then you have another high energy phosphate located onto that, and that is once again high energy. So we have two high energy bonds within an ATP molecule. And these two bonds, when we break them, which we will see, when you break these bonds, they're going to release a very large amount of energy. So what happens is ATP travels about the cells, transferring energy to any molecule in need. ATP transfers energy in the form of a high-energy phosphate. So here we have ATP, which it's ATP, but we're writing it like this so that you can see where the phosphates are going. You don't have to write it like that. You can just write ATP. And over here, this blue circle, this is going to represent a molecule or something within the cell that needs to be energized. So ATP just kind of roams around to each of your cells looking for something that needs to be energized. Okay, so what's going to happen is this process known as phosphorylation. And what phosphorylation is, what you need to know about phosphorylation is it is the transfer of a phosphate. So what's going to happen is we are going to break apart ATP and transfer a phosphate, a high energy phosphate, from ATP over to that molecule that needs to be energized. So now that it has this high energy phosphate, this molecule here is energized. The process or the enzyme that is needed to make phosphorylation happen, to make that high energy phosphate move, is called ATPase. Remember, enzymes often end in ase, and they're also typically named after what they do. So ATPase breaks down ATP. Okay, so transferring a phosphate is known as phosphorylation. When we break that bond, we have lots of energy here, so this molecule becomes energized. Well, now over here to the left, this is no longer ATP because we don't have that TP. We don't have that triphosphate. Now this becomes ADP, known as adenosine diphosphate. And di is the prefix that means two. So do you think that this adenosine diphosphate, this ADP, is going to have as much energy as ATP did? No, it's not, because now we only have one high energy phosphate instead of two. Okay, so just what this says down here, to recap this, the transfer of energy in the form of a high energy phosphate is called phosphorylation. The enzyme ATPase assists in the reaction, removing the high energy phosphate from ATP to form ADP, which is a lower energy molecule. So ADP does still have energy, just not as much as ATP. Now, that ADP can also travel about the cells, transferring energy to any molecule. That ADP will go through the same process of phosphorylation using another enzyme. We don't need to know the name of that. We move that phosphate over to the molecule or process that needs to be energized. That molecule becomes energized because it has the high energy phosphate. And now ADP is no longer ADP because we no longer have two phosphates. So what do you think it's going to be called? We have one phosphate left. Do you know the prefix for one? It becomes AMP, adenosine monophosphate, AMP. Now, this is not AMP. Do you think AMP, you think energy? AMP has no energy. It is a dead battery molecule. It has no energy. So it's not, because there's no high energy phosphate. We just have a normal bond here. So it is not going to be able to energize any molecules. So just recapping this slide, it says the transfer of energy in the form of a high energy phosphate, once again, is called phosphorylation. An enzyme assists in the reaction, removing the high energy phosphate from ADP to form AMP, which is an energy depleted molecule, meaning it has no energy. Okay, so that concludes our time allowed on this video. Tune in to the next one, video 2.